This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Blood Red podcast. We're back again after another defeat for Liverpool after losing 3-0 at Manchester City. I'm Mark Jones, I'm your host for today's show. I'm with Ian Doyle, a very stern looking Ian Doyle.
Isn't that every day?
It is every day. It's especially lately. We will go straight into it. Liverpool went to Manchester City and lost 3-0 and it wasn't very good.
No, that's the end of this podcast.
Yep,
Goodbye.
see you later.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
But we will delve into it. And no, it was all it basically did was kind of show what we knew already. I think to a certain degree, this is going to sound a little bit odd, but to a certain degree, if you listen to what Arne Slot was saying before the game, when he's certainly speaking to us, he mentioned last season's game where Liverpool won 2-0 at Manchester City, and he says, we might have won 2-0, but we scored off a set piece, and we scored another goal. But most of that game was Man City attacking. And if you'd have played that game, Liverpool would win that 10 times out of 10 is basically what he was saying. It was kind of one of those ones where they did enough, and once they'd got ahead, they had the extra energy to defend City and keep them out. Now, unfortunately, what happened on Sunday was basically the opposite. Liverpool looked as though Liverpool looked nervy at the start. They looked a little bit worried. They didn't look as though they were fully in command of the situation. Then they get away with the penalty, which obviously gets saved by Mamardashvili. And then even from that warning, they just they didn't seem as though they could raise the game any further in the first half, at least. They go 1-0 down. The goal from Haaland, which is very avoidable. We'll get into this in a bit. And then right towards half-time, they concede a second one, and that's essentially the end of the game. They did a lot better second half, but there's no suggestion that they were ever going to get back into the game. And once Doku makes it 3-0, that's it. So that's the concern for me, is that the gains that they got on the last couple of games, where Villa, they weren't particularly brilliant, but they did enough to win. Real Madrid, they were good. They were good against Real Madrid. Deserved that victory. And that kind of seemed to be a signal of where they needed to go. But unfortunately, whether the exertions of those two games, Slot decided not to change the team, and they just lacked that kind of energy or spark in the first half. And the thing is, given the way that they played in the second half would suggest that they weren't tired, because they were still running around an awful lot and they got much more into it. But Slot said afterwards they lost the too many duels in the first half, and funny enough, he didn't really want to take any responsibility. He didn't want his players to take responsibility for that. He was quite keen to say, look, that's not automatically down to the players, it's down to where they're positioned on the pitch, and that's down to the game plan, which by inference means it was him that made the decision, because in the second half, he said he changed things at half-time, which they needed to, and they did a bit better. But it's very difficult to gauge the second half because they were already 2-0 down, and City were in, I don't say conservation mode, but they certainly weren't going at it as strongly as they were in the first half. And overall, the disappointment is that Liverpool have lost the momentum that they'd gained over the previous two games where they beat Aston Villa and Real Madrid. And now going into this very, very 15-week international break, at least it'll feel like that. Well, not for me, I'm off for most of it.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. I'm pleased with it.
Yeah. So thanks. And going into that, it's going to feel very, very long, rather than, even a draw at Man City would have been like, that's a good return for 3 tough games, which were always going to be pivotal.
Do you think that's the main worry now? Because we were all hoping after Villa and Real Madrid, okay, that's the corner turn now. And it was almost like Man City was possibly the fixture you didn't want next. But as you say, a draw would have been okay, and it would have at least allowed this idea that things have got, things are going in the right direction. Does it feel now like it's just back to square one?
Yeah, go back to what I said before about Slot's comments about Manchester City. I mentioned it and then refused to address it. It seems sometimes that he's kind of downplaying the achievements of last season. And not me, but other people have picked up on this. I'm just mentioning it now. I'm not sure whether it's been mentioned in the podcast previously. I've certainly not mentioned it. But and I think whether or not that's a little part of him going, and that justifies why we had to make so many signings. Some of them, obviously, Diaz wanted to go, Núñez wanted to go, Trent wanted to go. And obviously with the loss of Diogo Jota, they had to bring in another striker. So most of them were through, necessity rather than particular design. But then you get onto the two bigger ones, which are Florian Wirtz and Alexander Isak. And Wirtz, who I actually think did all right in the first half. I thought he did okay. He was the one Liverpool player looked like he'd bring the ball away, and he tried to get stuck in, but second half was a lot more difficult for him. I think City changed one or two things to kind of negate him. And Isak, obviously, just come back from injury, remains on the bench. And that is the question that Liverpool are not answering at the moment. And the 11 Premier League games in, they've lost 5 of them. They only lost 4 last season. I think we were talking about it before in the office. They only lost 4 the season before that. And certainly, with the exception of the 2021 season under Jurgen Klopp, Liverpool were very, very difficult to actually beat. They didn't always win. What have Liverpool not had this season? They haven't had a single draw. If you don't count the Community Shield, which technically speaking they lost on penalties. But if you take, for example, the 2 games against Chelsea and Crystal Palace, they finish as draws. It's still not particularly... It'd still be a long way behind Arsenal at 6 points, but they'd be in the top 4, and they've only lost 3 games, and suddenly things will be looking a lot different. Losing to Manchester City away from home, in isolation, most teams do that. And if you want to win the league, you normally have to beat Manchester City either home or away. Liverpool did it both last season. In 1920, they beat them at home. Obviously, by the time they went to City, they'd already won the league by that point. But that it comes in the context of 7 defeats in 10 now, I think it is.
Yeah.
I think that is going to be the concern. And as I said before, the momentum that's been gained from the 2 wins against Villa and Real Madrid. I don't think it's entirely going to be lost because you still can't forget the fact that they did beat Real Madrid at home and kept the clean sheet. So if they can do that against them, they've got to start doing it away from home. It's 4 away wins and away defeats, in a row in the Premier League. First time that's happened since 2012. And I remember when Slot first came in last season, he said one of the first things he said to his team when he sat down, he says, "Look, we won. I don't know what it was, like 8 or 9 away games last season. That means there was 10 we didn't win. If we do better on that, then we'll." Able to finish higher up the league, which they did. And that's the concern away from home. The durability, they just don't seem to be able to see out when they do get the draws that we said at Chelsea, at Crystal Palace. And in other games, they just seem to fall away like they did at Brentford and at Man City as well.
We'll come back to Slot maybe later on, but just, do you think there's a lot of talk in the summer about how this, the way that this team was going to improve was by taking games away from other teams? Because there were lots of wins by 1 goal, 2 goals, maybe at the 2-0 here and there. Do you think that's been the issue where they've tried to create this new team which is more expansive, is more attacking? As a result, the balance perhaps has gone, and they just seem to now be in a situation where they've become a bit weaker as a result of trying to become stronger, really. Well,
one thing you'd say about the strikers, if you look at it, Jota and Núñez and Diaz, when he played up down the middle, is that they all worked incredibly hard. Certainly Núñez was quite keen to get back and get stuck in. It's sometimes at the detriment of him actually being up front and being there to score the goals when he was playing. But that all aided the defensive effort. Ekitike is somebody new into the Premier League, and again on Sunday, like he did, I thought, against Aston Villa and for parts of the game against Real Madrid, looks massively isolated. But for whatever reason, they seem to be unable to pass to a forward. And it's not just him. It's been once previously. It's where the slot system is set up to feed a striker at the moment. I don't know. Maybe that would explain why he brought in Wirtz and to feed Isak, but that's not been able to happen for obvious reasons so far. So yeah, that is the concern, that they have gone one way while forgetting the other thing. And when I say forgetting, he obviously wanted it to still be that way in terms of the balance, but there are a lot of little things that have gone against them. Like, you can change one thing, but you've had to change 4. You wanted to change the left back, you've got to change the right back. You've had to change your striker, and you've decided to change your midfield. So there's only the centre back's position that's not been changed. And then your goalkeeper gets injured anyway, so that does get changed. So I wrote something today after the game. Well, I wrote it yesterday, and it's appeared in the paper today and online today, where this might actually help some of the newer players that they're almost, let's face it, they're not going to win the league, are they? No, they're out. I mean, Slot didn't say that after the game, but he more or less conceded it without actually saying it. Now, that kind of expectation's off now. People won't be looking at Liverpool as title contenders. They'll just be now looking at them going, well, are they actually going to win some games? What's the plan? Where are they going to go after this? And that pressure will be taken off a group of players who've come in with not only having to take on the pressure and the unique nature of being a player of Liverpool or one of the very big top clubs in Europe, and then carrying that burden of and the Premier League champions as well when they weren't the ones that won it. You know what I mean? They didn't have all of that when they were playing last season, for example. I know some of them, like Wirtz and Frimpong, won it by Leverkusen, but the expectation wasn't particularly great on them that season. And last season, when they were still there, obviously when the expectation then came on them, they didn't get close to even challenging for it, I don't think. So that might help them. And then what will help them as well is if Slots goes, right, now I know what the plan is, now I know what we want to do. We might have some bumps in the road, but we have to stick to this one now because we spent an absolute fortune on all these players and this is how we want them to play.
Just going back to the game itself, obviously how it all unfolded, a real chance given to Man City early on with the penalty.
Yep.
Mamardashvili saves it, and you're kind of thinking, okay, that's the impetus now. That's the boost they need. Maybe there's something there. Never really responded to that, Liverpool, and never really got a foothold in the game from there, and then eventually go 1-0 down. Do you, looking at the team, looking at the lack of confidence there, is that a worry? Do you think they've just Haaland's missed a glorious chance there to go 1-0 up? That should be a relief, shouldn't it? It should be a real shot in the arm for him. It never happened though.
Well, it was very early on, and as we know, City like to dominate games at home, certainly in the first half an hour, so that was never going to change. My disappointment with the first goal is that it was so avoidable, and I know a lot of people are talking about City took it from one end to the other and passed it around, but Liverpool didn't get anywhere near them. And then what we noted, and I believe that Jamie Carragher noted it on his analysis, obviously we've not seen it, at the game, is when it was happening, is that when City broke down the right, I think Liverpool I don't know whether it had been a set piece or a corner or something, but there was some reason where Van Dijk was
swapped over
at left back and Robertson was in the middle. And Van Dijk was shouting over to change. Robertson says, no, hang on. And then when the moment finally came, they did swap. But then Robertson was a bit slow to come out and stop Núñez from getting the cross in. And I know Wirtz wasn't there either, but a lot of the players were all out of position at that point. But even though he gets the cross in, there's absolutely no way that Canati should be heading that clear. No. And he got his header all wrong. And that wasn't the first mistake he made. He technically, while he didn't give away the penalty, he may as well have done with his decision. And something a bit later on where Bernardo Silva should have got booked for a tackle on Van Dijk, and that all came from Canati just getting in the way of everybody. And he had one of those games where he was a little bit all over the place. And an interesting thing for me is that if that last season had been Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think there'd be a lot more uproar for fans because they'd say, "Wow, he's concentrating on his contract. This is, this, that, and the other." But there doesn't seem to be that with Canati, and I wonder whether or not some of the fans have decided, well, we know he's going to go, and but we're not going to overly criticise him because we're already starting to look ahead at what we can bring in, because obviously they still want to sign Mark Gay from Crystal Palace. Yeah,
so I watched the game on television. They made a point about half an hour in to show that Canati had the most touches of anyone on the pitch, and it was almost as though City were allowing that to happen. Let him have the ball because we know he's not the best with it.
Well, they're not the first team to do that.
No, they're not.
Quite a lot of other teams have done that, and I think there was a game recently where I think it may have been Manchester United where Canati ended up creating a couple of chances with some.
The one for Isaac. Yeah.
So it doesn't always work for the opposition, but he is. Yeah, if there's a ball playing centre back that you don't want to have the ball for Liverpool, it's Van Dijk.
Yeah, and just on the Canati situation, I mean, I thought he had improved over the last couple of weeks, but I guess the issue with him is you never quite know, do you? You're never quite sure when he's going to throw in one of these games, and I agree with him. I mean, the penalty incident, it is all him, isn't it? Conor Bradley, I thought, had a pretty decent game actually, in very difficult circumstances. Conor Bradley had that situation in control, and it's almost Canate's appeared, and now it's chaos.
Yeah.
He does have that in him, doesn't he? He does have that in him, and that's something which, talking about the contract issue, do you think it will become a problem going later on in the season if he doesn't sign it, as seems likely?
Well, it's odd, the fact that he's now less than 2 months away from being able to technically sign a pre-contract agreement with any club from abroad, and hardly anybody's talking about it. Yeah. It's like, I think the fans are just, as I said before, resigned to it, but obviously he's not as important a player for Liverpool as Trent Alexander-Arnold was. And that's the thing, basically. That's the reason why they can already see a future where Canati's not there and they wouldn't be too bothered about it, which might be a bit harsh on somebody who's, been a part of a regular in a Premier League winning team last season. But he tends to have on and off seasons, doesn't he? And I think this season has been so far. I mean, he did well against Arsenal, to be fair to him. and did well against Real Madrid. And, and those are basically two of the best teams that they played all season. And that's the great frustration with not so much just Canati, but with the team in general, is that although both of those games were at home, and I think that's still... I know we can't really count the Crystal Palace game because in the League Cup, because that wasn't really Liverpool's first team at all. United game, no teams won more at Anfield as an away team than Man United. And again, these things do happen more than you'd like them to, but they do happen. I think at home Liverpool have been doing reasonably okay, but away from home is where the real problem is. That goes back to what I was saying before about durability, and also about, you look at Canate, there's been other games, certainly away games, where he's not been at his best, and that's caused problems. I think at Crystal Palace away.
There'll be people out there who are waiting for us to talk about this. We have to discuss it. The disallowed goal. It was obviously a pivotal moment in the game. Liverpool hadn't played very well up to that point, but it was about 5 minutes to go before half time. Had that have stood, all of a sudden it's 1-1. There's a chance of getting in there at half time at 1-1. To me, I'm surprised. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm surprised it was disallowed. I think my sympathy is almost not with the on-field official who's flagged it for offside. I think you can understand why he's done that, because to him, he's looking down the line. Andy Robertson is in offside position. The thing that he cannot see is if he's blocking Donnarumma. Yeah. Now, if the referee can't see that either, give him a chance to see that. But they haven't done that either, and they've just told him to disallow it. So where do you stand on all that? It just seemed a bit of a mess to me.
Well, this is what happens when you fiddle with an already fiddly concept of offside, which is whenever you try and explain... When I was growing up trying to explain football to anybody, you'd always get stuck on the offside rule because it is a little... it's two players and it's one, but it can't be... And it's like, all right. Now, over the past... Basically, in the past, that would be offside. It would be offside, that would be it. But that's long gone those days. Now they've made it far more complicated. And by the letter of the law, it should have been a goal. And we only saw last season, Wolves played Manchester City. Manchester City scored a header in the last minute to where John Stones it was, where I think it was Bernardo Silva, wasn't it? Was almost not grappling with the keeper. The keeper's grappling with him because he was stood right in front of him. And it flies over. The keeper's got no chance of saving it, even though he's literally got hold or is being, Bernardo Silva is in his personal space. And that ultimately was initially disallowed, and that got overturned to be a goal. And this was not so much the other way around, because you said I didn't even notice that linesman had flagged, to be honest. And it was only later on that you realised, hang on, the referee didn't even go over to the...
No, that's the thing.
Yeah. It was only later on that you realised that. It was a bit of an odd one. And
I'm just not sure why he hasn't been told to go and do that, and then you judge it yourself from the angles, the 3-4 angles that we got straight away on the telly, how close Robertson is to Donnarumma, where the ball is going.
My initial thought was that it would get disallowed. But then I think that's purely because of the situation of where the game was being played and who the referee was and who the VAR was.
Yeah.
So how can you get consistency from officials when individuals, again, having thought about it, Michael Oliver was the one who was ultimately responsible for it, not Chris Cameron. Yeah. But he could have asked to go and have a look if you really wanted to.
There wasn't so much communication between the VAR and the referee. If you want to have some good communication... First one I've ever done. If you want to have some good communication online, you're going to need a good VPN, and you're going to need NordVPN. And to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, you can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There is no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the podcast episode description box.
Below?
Yeah. Doesn't say below. Doesn't say below.
Yeah, but we say below.
I haven't got below. Below. Yeah. Apparently it's below. Just quickly back to it. Had it have gone in, as you say, it's
a cracking header.
It's a great header.
And the weird thing is that when they lined up the corner, we were like, Salah taking that.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah, Salah taking that. It was a great corner and headed in. It was a very good, well taken set piece.
Another one, because they've seemed to have improved on them in the last few weeks. Real Madrid.
And of course, they score from one at Man City last season.
Yes.
Having Manchester City had scored one the previous season at Anfield, which they celebrated quite readily. I think it was John Stones scored the near post one. Yeah. So, it's not quite Arsenal levels of reliance on set pieces, but
What is?
Yeah, exactly. Nothing in life is. Yeah. Just don't mention that online. They get really
they do.
upset about it. Yeah. But yeah, I think that does change the game because it puts that seed of doubt in Man City's mind going, hang on, we played really well here and suddenly it's 1-1. How's that happened? Because we know that happens because it's happened loads of times to Liverpool over in recent times.
Do you think they were a bit guilty then of after it's disallowed, heads dropped a little bit, and then probably the key goal in the game is the second one?
Yeah, the key goes the second one at the time, and while it was lucky because it obviously takes a massive deflection, where were the Liverpool players?
Yeah.
And again, that was set piece, short corner, come across to him. So, yeah, Liverpool will be extremely disappointed with that one. I think that's probably the one that will annoy them the most.
Yeah.
Without being an individual mistake, if you see what I mean.
At 2-0 down, though, you've got to say the performance improved in the second half. They could have got one back on a couple of occasions, but you just never quite believed they were going to.
Well, the Gakpo one was the one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Scores that, suddenly it becomes very interesting. But again, he'd only just come on, and it was hit really hard across, and it did bobble just as it was getting towards him. So wasn't too critical of him on that.
No.
But yeah, I think Liverpool did finally find a way to get around Man City because they just didn't in the first half, did they? And that's, again, it's after they took off Ekatike and started shifting things around, and they technically played for a while without a striker, didn't they? And then that's when they suddenly started creating some stuff. So it's like, how does that make sense?
Before the game, I was having a couple of messages with people, and we were looking at the respective midfields and City's with no Rodri. Obviously, they've got Nico Gonzalez, who I think is sort of being tasked with becoming the new Rodri, isn't he? And it was one of his better performances. Apart from him, though, but obviously there was Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden, a lot of players kind of that you'd associate with maybe playing a bit wider were playing a lot quite centrally, weren't they? And I saw Slot talk about that afterwards.
Yeah, he said that basically they overloaded the midfield.
Yeah, so in terms of the Liverpool midfield, we were also enthused over the past week with the kind of old gang getting back together in Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai. They lost that battle, though, didn't they, really, against City?
Well, they lost it in the sense that there was more City players to get in the way. Yeah. So whenever Liverpool had the ball, they'd either lose it or they get tackled because they couldn't get past everybody, and all the passing channels were blocked off if they ever tried to go forward because City kind of swarmed on them. And I think that partly came from the fact that Wirtz was playing on the left wing, and I think they took the decision, well, we can let him stay out over there because he's not a winger as such. And yeah, there was... Slot said after the game, he says, we knew what we wanted to change. We wanted to get to half-time. It'd been great if it had been 1-1, but 1-0 would have been fine, but 2-0 makes it a lot more difficult. So the second goal was the key one. And it's that basically that 10-minute spell, wasn't it, between the goal being disallowed and then them scoring then half-time. I think that's the pivotal moment of the game. And as I said before, the second half, we can talk about how Liverpool improved, but by then it's too late.
It was. Just to go back on Slot, some of those comments, as I say, after the game, we spoke before about this is now his most difficult period. You'd think as a manager, things have gone largely very smoothly for him throughout his career. You think back to Feyenoord and previous clubs, and then to come into Liverpool and the way it all went last season. Do you think there's a concern there because he hasn't experienced this before, and it's on such a global scale? When you're the Liverpool manager, you're getting all sorts of pressure put on you. Do you think it's something that he can handle and he can embrace? And because he must be worried. He must be a bit concerned about how it's all gone.
Well, he'll be concerned about the results, yeah. I don't think he'll be concerned about his future because he won the Premier League in his first season, and the club have backed him in the transfer market to, what was it, a net spend of 260 million pounds, and they're not going to go a couple of months later and go, you know what, all that stuff, forget that, bye. Yeah. That's not happening. The only way he'll be sacked this year is if he gets relegated, which I think they already have enough points to be safe, to be honest. Well, maybe compared to other seasons, but they do need to improve. And the interesting thing is, after the international break, there's a lot of games there that they'd be looking as though... I mean, now you look at them and you go, oh, they're all difficult, but you'd rather play Nottingham Forest at home than Man City away. You'd rather play West Ham away than Newcastle away. You'd rather play Sunderland at home than Arsenal at home. Yeah. You'd rather play Leeds away than
Palace
away. Yeah. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of preferential games that are coming up, and you can even run it through to then they've got Brighton at home, haven't they? Who aren't quite as good as they were recent seasons. You've got Tottenham away, who can't seem to win at home. Then you've got Wolves at home, who just can't seem to win anywhere. And then you've got Leeds again. And then you've got Fulham away, and you're into the next year. So I think the game after that's Arsenal.
Yep.
So if Liverpool want to get this season back on track, you've got to be. I think that's a run of 7 games. I think off the top of my head, I think you've got to be looking at least 5 wins. But I'd be looking at 5 wins and 2 draws. 17 points. If you're taking 17 or more, then you're doing that's good. But if you're taking less than 15, that's when you've got to start getting concerned, because then the question mark is over whether you're going to be finishing the top 4 or not.
And I think just from going through those games, I don't think you can get away from the fact. Look, no one wants to make excuses for them, but it's been the fixture list has been tough to begin this season. These, going away to City and these hard away games. But yeah, it's
certainly been tough if you're one of the newer players.
Yeah,
because it all adds up, doesn't it? I mean, even the games that they won at the start of the season, they were kind of muddling their way through quite a lot of them. Not that they necessarily didn't deserve to win, like they deserved to win at Burnley, they deserved to beat Bournemouth. Newcastle was a bit iffy. Beat Everton. I know Everton were all right second half, but Liverpool were way better in the first half. And who was the other game they won? Arsenal. Arsenal, yes. Of course, yeah. And Arsenal definitely deserved to win that one. So you couldn't really argue with that. I just think that there's been those 5 games, those 15 points may end up being really important at the end of the season. I think I've always said that.
And then it's those matches you mentioned before about the late defeats at Chelsea and at Palace. Almost learning to draw those games would have been preferable. But going into this run, there are a lot of games. There are games that should be winning there, aren't there? And those are the games where do you think he needs to almost double down on some of these new signings, get Isak in the team, stick with Wirtz, maybe. Well,
that's it. I mean, also just looking at the season as a whole, if you're going for the title, it's not been a very good start to the season. But any other thing, you just go, it's been okay. It's been okay. Look at they're 8th in the table. There are only a couple of points off the top 4. I think there may even be 1 point off the top 4, actually. They're only 4 points off City's second.
Yeah. Such a tight table,
so
isn't
the
it?
2 points off third, that's Chelsea.
Yeah.
So that's only 1 result turnaround. And all the teams above them aren't going to finish above them. Simple as that. But yeah, if you were looking at Liverpool's title contenders, which they were at the start of the season, although I never thought they were actually ever going to win it, which I put that in writing as well. I'm not just saying that
you've
now.
showed me.
No,
You've showed me
exactly.
today.
You have that now.
Yeah, I believe
so
it.
It depended entirely on them hitting the ground running, which after 11 games they quite clearly haven't. There's still 27 games to go.
Yeah.
So there's a long way to go, an awful lot of points. It's not been an absolute disaster at all by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not been what I think a lot of people would have expected, and I think a lot of people haven't been paying attention. It's been worse than anyone would have thought. But I think if anybody thought that Liverpool would be 6 points clear or whatever at the 4 points at this stage of the season, has clearly not been paying attention to what's been going on over the past 5 months.
I've got a little hopeful theory that things might come together in kind of January, February, around about the time that the knockout stages.
Well, I wrote this as well.
Did you?
Yes,
maybe that's where I read it.
Exactly,
Maybe that's where I read it.
Yeah.
But do you think these next run of games now up to New Year, I look at them as the perfect chance for the team to bed in and with an idea that, yes, I think we're all saying title is very, very unlikely now. But as you say, there's so much football to be played, and I'm using the PSG example. PSG won the Champions League last season after taking 3-4 months to get going. This team, this squad, has enough quality to have a good run in Europe, doesn't it, for example?
Yeah, they were PSG going out when they were 2-0 down against Man City in the last game.
Yeah, that's right.
And they scored, was it 2 goals in about 5 minutes, and then scored another 2 to win the game, and then they never looked back from that. They beat Brest 10-0, didn't they, on aggregate in the playoffs, then beat Liverpool, then beat Aston Villa.
Then Arsenal.
Yeah. So, and both Aston Villa and Liverpool beat PSG, didn't they, in the knockout stages? Liverpool obviously won at PSG, and Villa won 3-2, didn't they?
Yeah, the home, yeah.
And Arsenal managed to.
Arsenal beat them in the league phase at the beginning.
Yeah, that's right.
Well.
So they've but the one that they didn't need to win. Basically. Liverpool do have that tough Champions League game at Inter Milan coming at the second week of December. That's one where, given Inter so good in the Champions League in the last 15, 18 months, where they just don't concede and they get narrow wins. Well, until they play PSG in the final, they get absolutely battered. That will be a tough one. But they play PSV. If they win that, they're more or less.
That'll be
I think mathematically,
12 points.
They'd mathematically be, not mathematically, but going off what's happened previously, they only need a couple of points then just
and
to
they'll
get
at least
the
have the
playoffs.
playoff round, possibly. Yeah.
So they'd know that they'd have that coming. Yeah, it's just these are the games now that, for all the talk of like it's been a tough fixture list, which we've mentioned and Slot's mentioned. Now you've got an easier one. You've put yourself in a position where you've got to win these games, basically.
Yeah, well, I think we'll stop it there. It's been a little bit of therapy on a Monday afternoon. Another disappointing weekend for Liverpool, but they'll now go into the international break before coming back against Nottingham Forest. You can stay with us throughout the international break for all your coverage. Thanks, Ian, and thanks for watching.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.